Wild Lives by Faunographic.
Hey, and welcome to Wild Lives by Faunographic. I'm Rochelle. It's great to have you with us. Today we're speaking to James Rogerson, whose wild work has taken him everywhere, from Finland to the Seychelles, across his native United Kingdom to Africa and Iceland, and more recently to the tiger stronghold of Kanha National Park, which is in central India. James is incredibly handy with a camera, and his work as a naturalist has given him countless opportunities to get very close to Kanha's legendary tigers. Now, Kanha lies in the heart of Madhya Pradesh on the northern slopes of the Satpuras, and like other parts of the central Indian highlands, it's a mixture of rolling slopes, dense forest, bamboo groves, and then there's these sprawling golden meadows that seem to stretch as far as your eye can see. Its epic scenery and all-star cast of animals actually inspired Rudyard Kipling to write The Jungle Book. And in fact, in the towns surrounding the national park, you'll find many businesses have called themselves Mowgli, in honour of Kipling's main character. It all just adds up to an atmosphere of natural drama and magic. The park was founded in 1955, and today it consists of two main conservation areas. There's a 917 square kilometre core zone and a buffer zone of 1,134 square kilometres. It's a huge area, and it's currently home to around 80 adult tigers and about 28 cubs. That's according to a recent monitoring exercise. Now that's a pretty impressive number, especially when you consider that experts believe there's only 2,000 to 3,000 tigers remaining in the wild. To have over 100 in Kanha is a pretty big deal. But why do tigers intrigue us so much? Why do we take our kids to the zoo to see them? And why do we use them on logos to spruik everything from breakfast cereals to bedazzled t-shirts? Personally, I think it's because everything about the tiger conveys power and dignity and mystery. But there's probably a bit more to it than that, and someone who knows a lot more about these intriguing predators is our naturalist mate, James Rogerson. James, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
In your recent work at Kanha, you've come across a large number of tigers, but quite a few of them do stand out. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, there are quite a few famous characters in Kanha. So it's usually the big males that people are interested in, and one of them is known as Munna, and he is a dominant male. He's about 17 years old now, and he's easily recognisable because he has the letters CAT imprinted across his forehead. So his markings, all tigers have these unique markings and patterns, and you can fairly clearly see the word cat across his forehead. There are lots of other well-known females as well. So there's one called Behaviour female, who's very good at rearing cubs, and I think twice in a row now. She's previously reared 4 cubs a couple of years ago, and this season they've got 4 of her cubs that are now sub-adults, very confident animals, and have been really showy and been really drawing people to Kanha. In particular, one of the zones, there's 4 zones in Kanha. There's one particular zone, Mukhi zone, and that's where these 4 sub-adults that are the offspring of Mahavir female and possibly an older male called Kingfisher. Mm-hmm. He's not around anymore, and he was absolutely a huge male, and again, another really big, confident one. Mm. So the ones that people tend to know and people tend to like are the ones that show up and put on a good performance and are seen fairly frequently.
Do you have a favourite?
Yeah, I do. I think my favourite is actually it's one of Munna's sons, and there are quite a lot of them. So you get a big male who's dominant, and he moves around different areas of the park, mating with lots of females. So they tend to, you see these sort of lineages, and there's a few of his brothers around. But this one called Chota Munna, which means little Munna. I've seen him 3 years in a row. He's a bit of an underdog. A lot of the guides, certainly previous years, thought he was a bit of a joke because he's a bit of a puppy dog. He'd run away from other tigers.
Oh, really?
And his brother has got an older brother called Umaparni, and he's pretty mean. He's pretty tough, and he'd always boss him around. And it was interesting because this season I went back and he put on, it looked like about 50, 60 kilos, and he was bigger than his older brother. And now, everyone's following him around, and he's like the new king of Kanha. Not quite to the sort of standard of his father, because he doesn't have the distinctive markings, and he's not quite there yet in terms of size, but he's really good in terms of just ignoring the vehicles. Everybody gets good photographs with him. He sleeps in the middle of the road, so you'll just have this tiger roadblock and tends to cause mayhem, and but leaves people with smiling faces.
Do you remember the very first time you saw a tiger in the wild?
Yeah, so that was 3 years ago, and that was in Kanha.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually, in terms of a sighting, tiger sightings tend to just be fairly brief. So you'll get sort of alarm calls, possibly.
What do you mean by alarm calls?
Alarm calls of the other species, so the tiger's prey species, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So things like the monkeys, the langur, have got a real sort of sharp barking call. The spotted deer have got a really high pitched. It's almost like a scream.
Mm.
That can tell you where a tiger is likely to be. So you listen to the movement of the alarm calls, and then eventually, you get yourself in the right place, and hopefully you'll be there when a tiger crosses the road.
Mm.
So the first sighting was one of those. It was fairly brief. It was a tiger just crossing the road, but the build-up was the best thing. It was, you get this sort of anticipation. You can hear the alarm calls. They're heading in your direction. Everybody sort of moves their vehicles into position. And Kanha in particular, they're very good about leaving space. So they tend not to crowd it. And unfortunately, that can happen in other parks. There can be a little bit of overcrowding. But if that happens, and you've got this big mass of vehicles, then the tiger's possibly not going to come out if it's a nervous one, if it's not used to people. At Kanha, they're very good. They tend to leave, plenty of space in between the vehicles. And this female, it was one called Chota Munna, which she's about 10 years old, and she looks really young. It's quite interesting. There's quite a few females in the park that are her daughters that look older and bigger than her. You could hear the alarm calls first, and then put her head out of the undergrowth, look left, look right, casually sort of skip across the road, and then that was it. It was very, very quick, but
your heart would have been jumping.
It was probably not the best sighting I've ever had, but certainly the build-up and the noise was fantastic, yeah.
What do you think is among your best sightings then, if that wasn't your best?
I think one of the best sightings... early on, so this season was October, the end of October.
Mm-hmm.
We got this big male, I mentioned him earlier, Umaparni, and he's another son of Munna, and he killed a gaur. So gaur are these 1,000 kilos of cattle that you find across India, and in particular in central India. And he'd managed to bring one down. He didn't actually see the kill, but he was busy sort of eating it in the middle of the meadow. And there were maybe 8, 9 jackal trying to chase him off the kill. All the jackal howling at the same time. This incredible high-pitched howling noise. And then he was. Obviously, they're not going to manage to muscle in. So the idea was the jackal were trying to chase him away, and while he was chasing one, the others would run in and grab a little bit of food.
It's like
he was foaming at the mouth. It was absolutely exhausted because he's a big tiger, and tigers they're not endurance animals.
No.
They sprint, they take something down. They completely exhausted him. In the end, he walked off into the jungle, and it's like he'd just had enough. He came back the following morning, because everyone went back to the same spot, hoped to see him again. He just dragged it into the jungle, dragged the whole. Probably wasn't an adult one, but it probably would have been at least.
They're huge animals, though. They are massive.
Yeah. To have seen him kill that would have been incredible.
Oh yeah.
There are some. There's one particular. I've not seen him because I think it was like 5-6 years ago. There was a tiger called Gaur Singh. Singh means king.
Mm-hmm.
So he was well known for killing gaur, and that was his main prey. So there were a lot of people who would get the chance to see a big tiger take down these huge animals. If I could choose to see something, then that would be what it.
Oh yeah, especially with their horns, they're like spears on top of their heads. You know what I mean? They're massive animals.
Oh yeah. I've seen them chase away leopard, so they're not very tolerant of cats. They keep a close eye on them. And when they turn and they've got a really weedy call actually. Such a big animal, they've got this sort of a high-pitched sort of whistling sort of call, and then they tend to gang up on the cat or whatever it is that they don't like, and horns first, and most things just run and flee. But
They take
these
them
big
on.
Tigers.
Oh, that'd be awesome to see. So Kanha is divided into several main tourist zones. There's Muki, Kanha, Sahi and Kisli. And then around that there's the buffer zones. Do you have a favourite area?
Yeah, the areas, I mean, they change depending on which tigers are active where. At the moment, certainly the past few years, Muki zone has been the best for tiger sightings. But they've all got, different aspects, that make them slightly different. So the forest can be different. So Kanha zone has got a nice big sort of open meadow. Kisli, lots of bamboo and sort of rocky areas. But Muki's got a nice sort of combination of everything. They've also got lots of other species like deer. The well-known the species that Kanha is very famous for, the barasingha, which is a species of deer, commonly called a swamp deer, and they live in the swamp. I mean, you often see them in bodies of water, and Muki zone's got quite a few nice big open bodies of water. So you can see these big, especially around sort of January, you can see these huge stags with undergrowth draped off their antlers, trying to impress the females. And on a misty morning with a fog as well, which you do get quite a lot of. You go to India and you'd expect hot weather, and it's not like that at all. So in the winter months, we had 0 degrees for about a week, 10 days in a row, and there's a nice sort of mist on the ground. You even get a little bit of frost. So seeing these huge deer, walking through the water, antlers draped in undergrowth, and they're some of the sites you tend to see more around bodies of water, which Muki's got quite a few.
So your previous work as a zookeeper and a wildlife lecturer gave you a truckload of knowledge, but it wasn't until your life actually took an unexpected turn that you found yourself in Kanha. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in wildlife. I've been interested in very little else, to be honest, other than wildlife. I was very lucky to get a job in a zoo quite early on. Yeah, near my parents' home at the time, so I was about 13 years old, I think. I started working on weekends. Yeah, it's interesting. It was with birds, so I was a bird keeper initially. So lots of storks, cranes, a lot of the species, in fact, that you can see in Kanha. Some of my favourites, things like lesser adjutant storks. They look like a marabou. So like an Indian version of a marabou, and I remember very well working with those and having a particular hand-reared one called Larry. He'd choose the people he liked, and the people he didn't like, he'd just try and destroy as soon as he walked into the anyway. So I was teaching. I've been teaching for about 10 years in lecturing in animal management and conservation, and I unfortunately I got an autoimmune condition, fairly sort of rapid onset, similar to arthritis, but very rare. I had to take over 6 months off work, and things were rapidly getting worse. I didn't get a diagnosis, so nobody really knew what was going on. And I had put my house up for sale, sort of feared the worst. I thought, I'm not going to be able to work. I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage once my, sick leave runs out. So I prepared for the worst. And thankfully, I managed to get a diagnosis and get some treatment, and things started to improve. By then, I'd had an offer on the house, so I took it, and it was a bit of a shake-up, really, thinking I'd always fancied travelling. I'd always wanted to go to India. I thought, fantastic bird life. Not so much the tigers, in fact, the reptiles and the birds more so. And I thought, well, what if something like this happens again? What if it flares up again? And what if I can't? And it just this sense of urgency, to get out there and see those things. And so that's what I did. I finished my job. Not without some sacrifices. I had to move back in with my parents, which is where I still am. Hopefully, referring to it as a temporary, as a stopgap, but it's not changed just yet. And I think after I'd sold my house, within 2 weeks, I looked at the first place to go was India, and it was Kanha. I did a little bit of digging around and looking at, some of the more interesting wildlife in central India, and I got out there. And I've done quite a bit of travel since. My condition hasn't changed too markedly. I still have to take quite a lot of pain medication and immunosuppressants to keep it under control.
So when you were actually working in the zoo, though, you did specialise in bird keeping, as you mentioned. What was it like being amongst Kanha's prolific bird life? Did you have any favourites?
There's some really nice sort of colourful small birds. So a lot of the flycatcher family. So we've got the paradise flycatchers. They've got these long males, got these long white streaming tails. There's also a brown form as well. They're both the same species, and they both occur in Kanha. But the white ones in particular, when you see them flying through the bamboo forest, they're stunning little things. And there's some of the calls as well. I mean, everybody tends to think about the visual aspect, but some of the calls of some of the species, some of the cuckoo family. There's a bird called a greater cuckoo. It's the largest member of the cuckoo family, and it's got this really distinctive call that you just hear it and you just instantly think of tropical jungle.
Yeah.
And another one that's really well known, mainly by its nickname, which is the brain fever bird.
Oh.
And the brain fever bird, it's actually a common hawk cuckoo, and the noise it makes sounds like it's saying brain fever over and over. It's repeated. The name supposedly comes from people being driven insane, probably while they were lying in bed suffering with malaria, and it repeats this brain fever, brain fever, brain fever, brain fever. Very high pitch.
Absolutely maddening.
Like almost every safari you would go out, you'd pick up a new call. A lot of the guys that are working there as guides, they've been living in the forest all their lives, either on the edge, or some of them, as a couple of the guides that I knew from Kanha Jungle Lodge, where I was working, were actually born in, one of them was born in an elephant camp. They instantly recognize all these things. Their species identification is incredible. To be able to pick it out, because you can hear so much going on around you, so to be able to pick out one bird call and go, oh, this is this species. But yeah, some of the iconic ones, brain fever bird, definitely, greater cuckoo, and probably, paradise flycatcher because of that long white streaming tail. Yeah.
So back to the tigers though, what's been the most interesting behaviour you've seen or have heard about in the field?
I think some of the interesting behaviour is always, when you're seeing tigers interact with each other. So you generally, you read the literature, you talk to people, and they say, tigers are solitary. And of course, they're probably comparing them to lions, which of course highly social. But tigers, have a lot of social behaviour as well. So territorial behaviour is an obvious one. You get a lot of territorial behaviour between males, but I also saw some interesting territorial behaviour between two female tigers. So there was, this is in Kanha Zone, big open meadow, and there's a female called Neelam. She's got 3 sub-adult cubs. She sort of dominates this area called Kanha Meadow. And lots of vehicles were watching her. So this Neelam, she was sat there grooming herself, cleaning herself in the sun and the grass. Some people had seen her cubs previously in this dense patch of forest, which is just to one side of the meadow. And everyone's watching nice and calm. People are taking pictures, and then you could hear this almighty roar from this dense patch of cover where her cubs were. And the roar wasn't, from a sub-adult or a cub. It was an adult animal. It's an adult male. So adult males quite often come in and kill cubs. So the female will come into season. They get to mate with her. People were fearing, for the cubs' lives, expecting to see cubs fleeing. And instantly, as soon as the roar was heard, Neelam, the adult female, sort of sprinted out of the meadow, quite a distance into this patch of forest. And you could see the trees shaking. You could see the bushes shaking. You could hear the roaring. So obviously, she was fighting with what everyone assumed was another male. Eventually, I quite clearly tell the difference between a male and a female. Males with a much broader head, and 4 legs are much thicker, heavily set. And it was a female that walked out, and this female had got a few cuts. Her nose was bleeding. Not too much damage, but, it obviously been fighting with another tiger. And everyone assumed that was Neelam, and the male was in there, possibly, finishing off her cubs. The forestry department, the rangers had just turned up as well. Someone had radioed through, and they were really concerned because when this happens, they try and break it up. Usually, the best course of action with wildlife is, it's a hands-off approach. But because tigers are so rare, every one of them's precious. If you can, avoid one of them being killed, then that's what they do. They will often intervene, sometimes using elephants, sometimes using vehicles. But it turned out, there's an ID guide. I've got an ID guide on my phone. I checked it out. I thought, this isn't Neelam. This is not it's another female, and it was. There's another female referred to as a link 8 female. And what had actually happened is this female had come into the Neelam's territory, attacked the soft target, which was her cubs, just so that she'd be, disturbed and upset, and hopefully be pushed a little bit further out of her territory, so that this link 8 female could take some of the territory and part of Kanha Meadow as her own, for her own cubs. So incredible. This sort of everyone made these assumptions, because of what they thought
it has to be male. Yeah,
it was actually female, female on female, aggression, which happens as well. It's a few things that I've missed. Since I've been back in the UK, I see some fantastic pictures of this Chota Munna, the first one that I saw, with a few of her cubs and in a water hole, and then a male cub of the behaviour female sharing the same water hole. Yeah. All sort of sat there out in the open, which is really unusual, So sometimes, there are these...
But didn't he go and kill it a couple of days later? So I heard that MB2, the one who was sharing the water hole, a few days later has killed one of Chota Munna's cubs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Whilst you see these, sometimes they do share territory and everything seems to be getting along fine, it does go pear-shaped. And there have been some really sort of sad examples of females that have been killed by usually adult males. And there was one known as a buddy female. First of all, she had her cubs killed, and then she was killed by the male. Probably the male that had tried to kill the cubs had then tried to mate with her. They'd gotten into a fight, and he killed her as well and partially eaten her. So you get, sometimes you get these, witness these what look like, moments of, affiliation and even affection between tigers, and then the next minute
it's war.
They're trying to eat each other. So there is social behaviour there, but it's quite complicated. I think individuals, the way they approach social behaviours, they're very much down to the individual tiger.
And quite volatile by the sound of it too. So I've been to Kanha a couple of times and I've seen the tigers get very, very close to the open vehicles. Have you ever had any hairy moments or seen anything where the tigers have got frighteningly close?
Yeah, they can get incredibly close. I think early on I got some fantastic shots from a tiger that walked. This is the Chota Munna, which is probably why it's one of my favourites. Walking straight towards the vehicle and almost sort of brushed alongside it. I had to lift myself out of the way, take my camera out of the way, and you could smell it. But aggression, it just doesn't happen. I've never seen it happen. And there are some cases. Thankfully, they're very rare. But I think it's all to do with the way that the guides and the tourists as well, to a certain extent, behave around the tigers. So giving them space on the road. If you don't block their path and you let them get on with whatever they're doing, then they tend to just ignore the vehicles like they're part of the forest, and they see them every day. So there's no reason for any aggression. There are some cases, but thankfully they're very rare. But yeah, you feel vulnerable. Of course, you've got these huge, 250 kilos of cat, walking alongside you, and they're open-sided vehicles. And the ones in India, they're not like Land Rovers. They're pretty small. It wouldn't be difficult for them at all to sort of jump onto a vehicle, but they don't.
They're tiny little vehicles, and you definitely feel frail when you're in them. But there's nothing quite as spectacular as seeing them so close and in the open like that.
Yeah, you've got to do it in an open-top vehicle, haven't you? There's some of the parks let you go in. Some of the smaller parks let you drive through in like a regular car. But
there's no adventure in that.
No, there's no adventure in that. No. And then, to be honest, it's a bad idea because they spend quite a lot of time reversing into each other as well. The roads are very narrow and manoeuvring, and those they call them gypsies. Yeah. These sort of little, I think they're made by
are they Suzuki?
A combination of Tata Steel and Suzuki.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned before the barasingers. Can you tell us a little bit about them? Because Kanha is quite famous for their breeding program.
Yeah, barasingha. So they're one of the main reasons why Kanha was focused on as a national park. Of course, tigers are important, but these particular subspecies of deer, the hard-ground barasingha, is found nowhere else. It was found nowhere else. They've actually relocated a few of them. They've moved them to other parks, but Kanha was the last stronghold.
Yeah.
And I think in 1972 there were about 65 individuals left. And
is that all?
They put up. That's all. Yeah. Very, very few. I mean, it's a very shallow gene pool as well. I mean, it's that's any lower than that, and they probably would have disappeared. So they want the scarcity of the species of deer was one of the main reasons why they focused on relocating villages. So they moved villages out of the core area of the park. They returned what was rice paddies and cattle grazing back into the natural sort of grassland and wetland that the barasingha loved. And today there are over 800 barasingha in the park. So they're very proud, and it's a great success story, and probably one of the best success stories of conservation in central India for sure. I must say, India and its approach to conservation are fantastic. These huge, great sort of sweeping measures that they take to try and conserve species is really admirable. I mean, I'm based in England, and our approach to predators is we just exterminate them. It's still the same. It's still happening today. We've even got, we've got government-sanctioned culling of species just because they, are a potential transmitter for a disease. Other methods aren't really looked at. That wouldn't happen in India. Of course, that's not without its problems, but the government tends to take a very sort of strong approach, and it works. These parks work. I don't think everybody's necessarily happy with, the idea of having people driving around, with these endangered animals, but you look at the value that it places on them and the involvement of local people, employment opportunities, it just makes them such a valuable asset.
Absolutely.
And there's no doubt about it, that these parks like Kanha have saved tigers and have saved barasingha, and without that tourism element, it just wouldn't work.
You are also an exceptional wildlife photographer. Some of the photos you've got, I'm so jealous of. I wish I took them.
So, thank you.
But what's your best advice for someone hoping to photograph in Kanha?
Okay, well, these tiger parks are hard work. A lot of people go to Africa, perhaps, for their first sort of exotic wild animal experience, and wildlife there is easily accessible.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. You can guarantee you're going to go out and you're going to see lions and you're going to see giraffe and you're going to see elephants, But India, it's different. You've got dense jungle, you've got individual animals moving around. It's more challenging, but it's definitely more rewarding because, if you put the time and effort in, then when you get the results, or hopefully, your images are going to be different, and there are other species that fewer people see. So, first of all, you spend more time.
Yeah.
When I was working there as guiding, there's a lot of people would come maybe for 1 or 2 days and maybe fit in 3 or 4 safaris, and it's just you're really the chances maybe sort of 50-60% that you might see a tiger if that's what you're going to photograph. But if you're going to spend time there, go for 2 weeks, spend 1 week in one park, maybe a week in another, or as long as you possibly can. And then your chances are much greater. You'll get to know the local area as well, and getting to know your guides. You quite often you'll get put you'll be in a vehicle with a local guide and a driver that maybe has come from the lodge, but also that the park employ them. But communicating with them and telling them what you want.
Yeah.
Trying to get a unique perspective can be very, very difficult. So get to know the guides, get to know the driver that you're with.
Yeah.
Be friendly with them. And they'll help you out. They want people to be happy and to come back. And if you create a rapport with them and they get a gist of what you're trying to achieve, like just telling them, okay, I want to be at a certain distance because of the lens I'm using. Those sort of things.
What about lenses?
In terms of equipment.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, you mentioned lenses. What sort of equipment do you recommend?
Yeah. So the equipment isn't everything. Of course, you see a lot of people with lots of fancy gear, which it can have its benefits. So a full frame camera, because if you're working in woodland, in particular in forest and jungle, it can be quite dark. So a full frame camera has the advantage of full frame sensor.
Yeah.
being more sensitive to light. Quite often, in particular, tiger activity is early on in the morning or later on in the afternoon when the light's quite a bit lower. So that can be an advantage. Of course, full-frame bodies are quite expensive, so they're not necessary, but they're an advantage. And then when it comes to lenses, I took this season, the only lens I really had with me was a 100 to 400 on a Canon 1DX. And
that's exactly what I use.
Yeah, the same one. I know. Yeah. I remember using the same gear, because then you never know. I mean, you can have a tiger right next to you within a couple of feet, and then they can walk off into the forest and be far away. You need that flexibility. I mean, a lot of professionals will take maybe like a 70 to 200 on one body, and then a prime lens, maybe like a 500 millimeter prime lens on another. But that takes up a lot of space, so that you can pick up one camera if it's a little bit closer, or things a little bit further away. But if you're in these small vehicles, it can be tricky to hold on to everything at once.
Oh yeah.
And using a tripod is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So don't take a tripod. Use a bean bag, and then use the sort of side supports. And they have these bars that are up behind on the back of the vehicle, but you can put a bean bag onto as well. A tripod's not going to help. It's probably going to make things worse, because you're tied into the vibration in the vehicle, and you've got to remember you've got at least two other people in the vehicle with you at the same time, the driver and the guide. The slightest movement from them is going to make things wobble a little bit. So probably use a slightly higher shutter speed. Be aware of that sort of camera shake. And then I think in terms of the images, trying to get good images, try and look for something different. It's very difficult when you get caught up in the moment and the animal's there, and you panic and you're like, oh my god, I've seen a tiger, and
I've been guilty of putting the camera
get
down.
it in focus, and that's all you focus on. I want to get it in focus, and I'm going to click it, and I'm going to get as many shots as possible. But if you can just sort of pull back a little bit and think, okay, what's this animal going to do? How am I going to get the background and positioning it against something that's going to make it look really interesting. One of my favourite shots I got from this season was this Chota Munna, little Munna, the not so little Munna.
Yeah.
And we were following him down the road, and there was a wild boar started to cross the road, and he instantly sat down and waited and crouched. Of course, lots of people taking pictures. There were vehicles behind him, vehicles in front of him. And everybody thought, is he going to take it? Is he going to take this wild boar? So he just took a little bit of time. I had to sort of lean far out of the vehicle, get the wild boar in focus, and intentionally took everything else out of focus. So you look at the image, you've got something different. You've got a cat crouched in the foreground, and you can just make out that there's a tiger there. It's obvious there's a tiger there, but the focus is the wild boar.
Yeah.
So it's kind of putting you into the tiger's perspective. The focus is the wild boar. That's what he's watching. Everything else around is out of focus. So just think about it. Think about trying to get something different. There's a lot of people out there all trying to take the same images.
Yeah.
And chances are, your images are going to be the same as everybody else. So try and get something unusual. Try and get a different perspective, if possible. Maybe not on your first tiger sighting, because you won't be able to do anything else.
Even on my 20th sighting, I put the camera down and I'm swearing with delight. Do
you remember your first? What was your first tiger sighting?
Oh, my first tiger sighting was in Bandavgarh, which is the neighbouring park to Kanha. And I've never sworn with delight so much in my life. Like, it just appeared out of the, I don't know what species of plant they are, but it's kind of like they come up to about your chest height. They're quite a dense shrub. And she just appeared.
There's a lantana, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And she just came out of the bush, and she kind of walked alongside the vehicle, looked over towards us and snarled. And I just...
Wow.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it, but I can tell you that for me was the beginning of like a wildlife obsession with photography as well, because I had a camera with me. It was only it was one of the first generation, I think, of digital cameras. This would have been in the early noughties, and I didn't really know what I was doing with it, but all I knew from that was then I had to do more of it, because other people needed to see how incredible that was, and you can't get that from being in a zoo and seeing them. It's just that humbling feeling of seeing that animal doing its thing and putting you in your place with a snarl. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I've been to Africa, and you don't get the same experience lion, you know, or perhaps if you see leopards, because leopards are quite impressive and they're a little bit more elusive. But yeah, I mean, when people do see a tiger, people lose their minds.
Yeah.
But you know, occasionally, you know, you get people, guests, and I've worked with guests that have been for a week, that stayed there for a week, and perhaps for the first, 4, maybe 5 days, they hadn't seen one. So you have this build-up. You know, the previous days they might have heard alarm calls, they've seen pug marks, tiger tracks in the road, you know, that have been so close. So you have this anticipation. You know, it's constantly, it's building and it's building and building. So when it does happen, people just lose their minds.
That's actually what happened to me, because I'd been in Kanha National Park, which is further toward Kajaro, I think it's called, and we were there for like 4 or 5 days, and there was nothing. There was not a single, we didn't see a tiger, very few animals around. So by the time, you know, in Bandhavgarh, when I saw that female, forget it. Like, I was fist pumping, I was being the obnoxious Australian. It was just awesome. It was so good.
You keep going back, don't you? I mean, it's like, because they're elusive, it always feels like unfinished business. That's why I've continued to go back to India. You know, it feels like I want to see this. You know, I want to see territorial behaviour. I want to see, you know, a male tiger take down a gore. Those sort of things. You know, there's always so much more to see.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, James. You've been such a legend.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
See, I told you James was a legend. You know what else is legendary? His photos. Go and check them out at JR Wildlife Photography on Facebook, or head to Instagram and find him at jr.wildlife, or visit his website, which is jr-wildlife.com. And of course, for more wildlife news, travels, photography, etc., head to faunographic.com or check us out on Instagram at Faunographic. Catch you next time.
Wild Lives by Faunographic. Follow us on omni.fm or search for Wild Lives by Faunographic on iTunes. Subscribe today and you'll never miss an episode.